Top 10 waiver wire adds for week 16 on to the second round of the fantasy playoffs. And yesterday was a nightmare for injuries. Oh my God, it was awful, but it has opened up some very intriguing options. So while this is not the flashiest week for waiver wire adds, we do actually have some viable starters available on waivers. I know, shocking, but hear me out. We seriously do. So let's go ahead and dive right in because big moves make big wins. Let's go get those wins. Somebody's on a little hot streak here. JJ McCarthy, 2 weeks in a row, 2 QB1 performances in a row. I feel mildly vindicated on this one because by no means am I or have I ever been a JJ McCarthy truther, but I did really like him way back when he was awful in terms of being a stash for the long haul here because specifically of this stretch right here to close out the season, I don't think that JJ McCarthy has miraculously found himself and that all his problems are solved and that his inner persona of 9 has just come out and this is what it is. No, I don't think that's the case. I think he is taking advantage of a very weak schedule and he's thriving. So you got to give him credit where credit is due. Last week, Washington, this week, Dallas, week 16, the Giants, and week 17, Detroit, who by no means is not weak, but specifically against the pass. Yeah, unfortunately, they are giving up an ungodly amount of fantasy points through the air, including a 3-touchdown performance to JJ McCarthy when they played back in week 9. And that was literally his 3rd career start there. So, with more quarterback injuries and underwhelming performances piling up, JJ McCarthy is actually truly one of the better streaming options that you can potentially find on waivers. We're talking about a guy that will close out the fantasy season with literally 2 top 5 matchups. You can do a lot worse. We're going to have to make some uncomfortable decisions at quarterback this week. JJ McCarthy might be one of the more comfortable decisions that you can make. And if JJ McCarthy is not available on waivers, of course, let me give you a couple other options. You can turn to Bryce Young. I know, but he has a good matchup this week and he can play up. Aaron Rodgers as well has not played yet. So again, this game pending is terms of his health, remaining as it is. But he has a fantastic week 16 matchup against Detroit. We literally just talked about it. He should light it up and be very solid streaming option from a fantasy perspective. Colby Parkinson, one of our waiver wire stash guys. So happy to see him thrive here. And I truly think that he might be one of the most underrated tight ends available on waivers right now. Since the injury to Tyler Higbee, and technically one game before that as well, Parkinson has been on fire. Now, since week 10, he has had 6 top 12 finishes at tight end. That is 6 tight end 1 finishes in 7 games. Why are we not making a bigger deal about this? His only dud game was against Carolina where he saw targets. He caught 4 of his 5 targets. It was just for 27 yards, so very underwhelming performance without the touchdown. But that is the only game that he did not score a touchdown over that stretch. Matt Stafford is on fire and everyone is eating, yet Colby Parkinson is still readily available on waivers, and I understand it is because he definitely does not have the same ceiling as the higher end tight ends, right? I get that. But he has been a touchdown magnet with an excellent quarterback, a great offense, and he has an incredibly safe floor. Devontae Adams unfortunately went down with an injury, the hamstring injury. We don't know how he'll be. It's possible that he plays, but if he does not, that would open up even more opportunities for Parkinson because when we look at the receiving core, when one of the receivers gets injured, it hasn't been another receiver that's been stepping up. Stafford has been pushing volumes to tight ends rather than backup receivers. Parkinson is absolutely worth an add. Jaden Reed had another fine day, nothing big, nothing flashy, but it was a difficult matchup. But we are not adding him for what he did in this game specifically. We are adding him because Christian Watson left the game with an injury. It kills me as a Packers fan. Ugh. Now, it's not a major injury apparently. But again, we will need to see if this keeps him out for this week or potentially next week because, again, the Packers are vying for a playoff spot here. Watson had been on fire, and we did expect him to come back down to earth in this matchup, but the Week 16 matchup, that is what we were really looking forward to. It is the rematch against Chicago where Watson had 2 touchdowns, and if Watson is unable to go, that would open up opportunities for the other receivers, particularly Jaden Reed. As we saw when Christian Watson returned earlier, the Packers have been slightly conservative in terms of their approach to Reed's usage. He hasn't played a significant amount of snaps, and if Watson is out in an absolute must-win against Chicago, I would fully expect to see an increase in usage from Reed, making him a very fine flex option with legitimate upside here. In a deep league, you could also look at Dontavian Wicks as a replacement more directly for Watson's role in terms of how they play. So the Cardinals backfield, we got to talk about it yet again, and we got to talk about different players yet again, because unfortunately, things are switching up yet again. It did not go exactly as we had planned. Now, as a reminder, we're not judging based off the productivity in this matchup specifically because it was a difficult matchup here. So we weren't expecting God tier numbers, right? But week 16 against Atlanta and week 17 against Cincinnati, very good matchups. And my recommendation heading into this game was Zonovan Knight. You guys know that. And unfortunately, he went down with an injury very early. And instead of Amari DiMercato stepping up, it was Michael Carter who had the more productive fantasy day and the higher usage by far there. Now, it's possible here, and this is why we do have to exercise some caution here, because it could flip next week. We truly don't know. It is possible that Amari DiMercato was activated and not truly ready to play at a high level. He was on the field. He did get touches. It's tough to judge here, but it's possible they activated him to get him out there and that it would be a slow ramp up and maybe he's ready next week and takes over. So we do have to not go all in thinking that Michael Carter is going to be our significant savior here, but we do have to give him the priority because Bam Knight's injury, that seemed very serious. He was carted off the field, so we got to move forward with the assumption that this backfield is Michael Carter and Amari DiMercato. And again, I do like this backfield purely because of Jacoby Brissett, our glorious volume king, Jacoby Brissett. He moves the ball so well that it provides touchdown opportunities, and he is so benevolent that he provides plenty of check down opportunities as well. Now, the defense for Arizona is terrible, but the offense has no problem. Even against what is arguably the most difficult matchup against the Texans, Jacoby Brissett had the best performance of any quarterback against the Texans all year. That is crazy. So whoever is starting as the lead back in this backfield will naturally be the low-end RB2 for the next weeks. And Michael Carter does seem to have the clearest path to the lead back role here. Well. Another week, another strong performance from Blake Corum. 11 carries, 71 yards, and a touchdown in one of the most difficult run matchups that you could face in the Detroit Lions. And this was great to see. This was great to see because there's been a lot of skepticism around Corum's production since it had come in extremely easy matchups against Carolina and Arizona, and you could also attribute it to Kyren Williams briefly leaving the game against Carolina with an injury, and Arizona, that game obviously being a significant blowout. So you could make the excuses as to why the production was not going to continue moving forward here, but we definitely got our answer here in week 15. And again, this is no negative towards Kyren Williams. I love him. He had a fantastic day. He is the lead back and he saw his typical workload. This is not going to change. But what we are seeing is that Matt Stafford, even when he starts off the game struggling, operates at such a high level that the run game naturally has to succeed because the defense has to prioritize defending the pass, and there will always be goal line opportunities. So it opens things up for them to still be successful on the ground and just still get the goal line opportunities. It's literally the perfect situation for running backs. Now, we could have some worries next week about how well the ball will be moved with Devontae Adams aggravating his hamstring injury, maybe potentially missing there. We talked about it. And Puka Nacua briefly left the game, but no worries. That was apparently just cramps. Our superstar was just working way too hard. This is another tough matchups, but Blake Corum is a legitimate start option for your flex or even a low-end RB2 at this point. We talked about this in the waiver wire stash video. If Chris Rodriguez was out, that would put Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt directly in line for a big volume day and a great matchup. And he pulled through. Fantastic day, all on the ground, as expected here. Rodriguez was a game time decision, so it's possible that he is good to go next week and there's no issue, but this was a great performance from Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Perhaps it will earn him an increased role, but at the very least, in the event that Chris Rodriguez can't go, we do know that volume alone makes Krosky-Merritt a fine start. And the Week 16 matchup against Philadelphia is not bad. Philadelphia's run defense has been inconsistent, and they are dealing with a wide variety of injuries on defense. Krosky-Merritt is worth an add. Monitor the situation. Again, if Chris Rodriguez is healthy, that probably nixes any kind of trust level because, again, he has no pass catching upside, so he has to have volume, lead back carries, and touchdown opportunities to come through from a fantasy perspective. If we had that guarantee that he would be the starter and this was a out for the year kind of injury from Rodriguez, we would have Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt much higher on the list. But if he returns, it's a no-go. So monitor, proceed with caution, put in a little claim just in case he can't go because he definitely would be a low-end RB2 for sure. Everyone was super excited to see Woody Marks as the true lead back with no competition from Nick Chubb because Nick Chubb was out. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, Woody Marks got injured. What a year for us. Every time we feel super happy about a player, an injury comes in and just snipes all that optimism away. Now, we don't know the severity, but he exited the game and he did not return. He only had 7 carries before going down with the injury. And second year back, Jawar Jordan stepped in and had a fantastic day, surprising day. I mean, it was 15 carries, 101 yards, really showcased overall well-rounded capabilities as well. He caught 2 passes for 17 yards. Now, this was a great matchup. It was a great matchup against Arizona, which is why we talked about, liking Marks this week for sure. But next week is a great matchup as well against a Vegas team, a defense that heading into the week had allowed the 10th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. And we'll need to monitor the status of Chubb and Marks. Chubb's issue was ribs. Mark's issue was an ankle that he had been dealing with heading into the week. At the very least, we do know, we have enough evidence that the Texans clearly, apparently feel very comfortable with Jordan as their lead back if both Chubb and Marks can't go. So we do have to revisit this one because Adonai Mitchell had a great game in week 15. Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap, right? Basically. Week 15. 7 receptions, 10 targets, 69 yards, a touchdown. That was highly impressive with the very young and incredibly inexperienced Brady Cook at quarterback who had a rough day outside of his success specifically to Mitchell. Now, Mitchell is worth an add specifically in deeper leagues. You can roll him out as a boom bust player if you have a very extensive roster, it's deep, you're making difficult flex options, perhaps you made it into the fantasy playoffs, scraped in, managed to win in round 1, now you're in the second round facing the number 1 seed there, and you need a high upside swing. You can turn this direction because, again, he is just a boom bust player. This week's matchup, New Orleans. It's not awful. It's more of a middle of the road matchup. But in a standard size league, right, I would not go this direction. Mitchell, again, extremely high ceiling, super low floor. He has started in 5 games, and in those 5 games, he has had approximately 2, 6, 24, 3, and 19 fantasy points in PPR. That is volatility at its finest, right? But if you have to go this direction and you need a Hail Mary, perhaps Mitchell is the guy for you. Keep your eye on Luther Burden. Rome Odunze was set to return. He was active. Then right before kickoff, he re-aggravated his injury during warm-ups. So we'll need to monitor his status to see if he is actually going to be able to play this week. But regardless, Luther Burden had a very solid day. Again, very solid. 6 receptions, 7 targets, 84 yards, building on last week's production. He has now had 2 straight games with double-digit fantasy points in PPR. However, he did leave the game with an ankle injury. Problem for us is that it's tough to say if the injury was serious or if it was just a minor injury and him not returning was more of a function of the fact that this was a complete blowout. It wasn't even close. But if he is good to go and Rome Odunze remains out, Burden would be a flex option in week 16. He would not be a high-end flex option because it is a rematch against Green Bay. We just saw that a couple of weeks ago. He had 11 fantasy points in PPR in the first matchup with 4 receptions on 6 targets for 67 yards. Now that said, he clearly has a solid floor. He's got a solid baseline level of targets there, so we feel super safe with him. And if we get to week 17, there's a great matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, who heading into the week had allowed the 12th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. That number is still a bit skewed, still a bit undersold, because obviously that is for the entire season, and that includes the games earlier in the season when they still had their superstars on defense. If you are hard up at wide receiver or you play in an extremely deep league, you can look at David Sills. Sills had a fantastic week 15 performance, catching 6 of 10 targets for 78 yards, and quite frankly, it could have been a better day. He was sloppy. He was a little sloppy there. It seems unlikely that Drake London is going to return. Darnell Mooney has been incredibly disappointing. Kyle Pitts is truly the lead of this offense right now, along with Bijan Robinson, but Sills still is operating as a solid third option. Now, the floor can be low. In week 14, he had 0 fantasy points. That was a tough matchup against the Seattle defense. Week 16 is against Arizona. Very pass-friendly. Very pass-friendly matchup that Kirk Cousins should not have any problem with. So yeah, if he is operating as the wide receiver 1 in a really good matchup, theoretically, that does make him a low-end flex option in deeper leagues. This one is 100% injury dependent, 100%. The Saints are extremely thin at running back. It is getting ridiculous at this point. Alvin Kamara has missed multiple weeks. We got really comfortable with Devin Neal. Again, the injuries are killing us. We're sitting here looking at Devin Neal and we're like, okay, yeah, I like this dude. I'm putting him into my fantasy lineups and I feel good about it. I played him in, I would say, like 80% of my DFS lineups this week. Ugh, painful. And what happened? He went down with the injury just as we were feeling good, and the Saints are essentially left with Audric Estime. I don't think he's particularly good, and I don't have a lot of faith, honestly. I'm not entirely sure who I would start him over. I'm just being real with you. This is more of a deep ad. But at the end of the day, the Saints play the Jets. And if both Alvin Kamara and Devin Neal are out and Audric Estime is the lead back, we're talking about a Jets defense that has literally transformed into a legitimate fantasy point bonanza for running backs. Everybody can get it. And he has shown pass catching upside here, so he's well-rounded. So yeah, he would theoretically be a viable option if he is the lead back in this matchup. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can follow me across all social media platforms at It's Tara Time. So make sure that you are locked in, tuned in, subscribed, turn on notifications. We are closing out the fantasy season strong, and then we are heading into the off season. We are talking free agency, rookies, all that good stuff. So stick around if you love football. I promise this is the channel for you.